Hello, BookTube. I thought we'd do another starter kit, this time science fiction and fantasy. And the first thing I thought we should do is define our terms. And what better way to define terms for anything than by picking fight with the guys at Strip Cover Lit. In one of their videos, Dalton hinted that he is bothered by the fact that science fiction and fantasy are even in the same aisle of the bookstore. That they're such radically different things, they shouldn't even be grouped together. And I totally disagree with that. Not only are they not radically different, they're in fact the same thing. Both of them are variations on one type of writing, which is characterized by being internally consistent. In other words, its internal rules make sense according to their own lights, but which do not obtain in real life. A boy meeting a girl on a train in Moscow, having 3 kids, finding jobs, and enduring heartbreak is normal contemporary fiction, specifically because every aspect of it could happen in real life. But whether it's a Star Trek transporter or a faster-than-light engine or a transportation spell by a wizard getting me from here to the Kit Kat aisle of the supermarket, it's all equally unbelievable. It's all equally not in evidence in the real world. In the real world, there is no sorcery. In the real world, there are no spaceships. In the real world, as far as we know, there's no life other than Earth. So in the list of books that I'm going to recommend for you today, I'm not going to draw a very particular distinction between the two. Not only should science fiction and fantasy be in the same aisle, but the distinction ought to be removed. It ought to just be called SFF. And that's what this is. This is really an SFF starter kit. And the first one that I wanted to show you, these are all recommendations. They're in no particular order, and they're just, of course, the tip of the iceberg. The first one I want to show you is a science fiction name who is still alive, but largely fallen out of print, largely fallen out of the spotlight, especially for people coming to the genre new, and that's Robert Silverberg. And in particular, this is his novel Son of Man, although I could recommend virtually anything that he wrote, the Majapur Chronicles, Dying Inside, Night Wings. This is the story of a man in the 20th century who is plucked out of the 20th century and sort of set adrift in the time stream, comes to a future Earth with radically different groups of people in it. Aliens and complacent slugs and sex pots. And he finds his way through that world with wit and inventiveness and a kind of boyish malleability. And I think I mentioned sex, yes? Every page of it shows Silverberg's genius, and as you can see in most of his books. I think Son of Man is out of print. The next one, it's an absolute scandal that it's not in print in a commemorative edition. Just a scandal. And it's Startide Rising by David Brin. This is the story of a starship that is crewed by humans, genetically uplifted chimp, and some genetically uplifted dolphins. And they are carrying a cadaver that they found that is explosive in its implications for the settled ruling races of the galaxy. So they're being hunted by those races. And it's amazing. It's just a fully realized world. It swept all the awards, but more than that, it's just enrapturing from the very first sentence. And I think it's out of print. It just astonishes me. It goes to show you the first two, not unintentionally, but the first two go to show you the thing that has often been laid at SFF's door, which is that it is terrible to its own progenitors. It's terrible at honoring its own, and I agree with that. A newcomer to the genre, going into a bookstore, for instance, God help them, will have almost no conception of the riches of the genre that have come before. Next one is a trifle, and I admit that, but it's hilarious. It's Mention My Name in Atlantis by John Jakes, who went on to write a famous series or once upon a time, famous series of historical novels, starting with The Bastard. Everything by John Jakes is now out of print. It's a terrible shame. He was a hack of the First Water. And this is the story of Konax the Barbarian. It's a parody, obviously. He goes to Atlantis before it was lost under the waves, and in a series of blunders, one worse than the next, as is sort of typified by the fact that on the cover illustration, he is in the act of tripping. In a series of blunders, he brings about the destruction of Atlantis. And it's a wonderful old shaggy dog story. Our next one is, in my opinion, the greatest science fiction novel that's ever been written, and that is Dune, of course, by Frank Herbert. The story of the planet Arrakis and the boy who his family is betrayed, and he is forced to rely on the native inhabitants of Arrakis, and they teach him their secrets, and he teaches them his, and overturns the ruler of the galaxy. It's amazing. Just incredibly complex, incredibly unashamedly intelligent, and inventive on every page. It's one of those classics of the genre, whatever genre you're talking about, that actually earns every single inch of its veneration, like War and Peace. Our next one, equally the same thing. It's on the other side of it. If that's science fiction, this is fantasy, and that is, of course, The Lord of the Rings. Now, I don't know how many of you have actually worked your way through this. I'm including it as one book because Tolkien meant it to be one book, and it very much reads that way. These are the movie covers, but those of you who have not read The Lord of the Rings, but who have read David Eddings, Terry Goodkind, Christopher Paolini, really owe it to yourself to go to the source material. Go to the beginning. Go to the one that inspired everybody, whether they know it or not. Every superlative that has been said about them is right. Our next one is a book that I've mentioned here before. I don't think I've shown it to you. It's James Tiptree, and this one is Up the Walls of the World. This is the story of a gigantic, amorphous, evil cloud thingy that is rolling towards the planet Tyree, a gas giant that is inhabited by luminescent manta rays, giant phosphorescent manta rays, one of whom, Tivinel, is an incredibly realized character, and she and her people are aware of the fact that a secret initiative of telepaths on Earth, relatively present-day Earth, are sensitive enough not only to understand something of the danger that's coming, but that they also might provide, possibly, a way for the people of Tyree to save themselves at an ethical cost. There are always wonderfully evoked ethical costs in James Tiptree's books. This is thinking person's science fiction of the first order. Same thing with the next one. This is the mighty Ursula Le Guin. This particular book is neither The Left Hand of Darkness nor The Dispossessed, her two massive classics. This is what I consider to be her best book, The Lathe of Heaven, about a man named George Orr, whose dreams change reality. And he's aware of it, and it's driving him to insanity, as I think it would anybody. And it's set in a slightly dystopian, slight future. He is sent to a psychiatrist who, because he's at ground zero when it happens, realizes what George Orr can do, and of course he immediately starts dreaming the wrong kinds of dreams, and everything unravels from there. First and foremost, reality, and the smartness of it, the way it will make you think long after it's over. It was adapted for the BBC a long time ago, 30 years ago, in a beautiful adaptation. Probably spent $50 on special effects, but you don't notice. It's so good. And it was adapted a second time. That it wasn't quite as successful, because the thing with a story this good is you've got to stand back and let it do its work. You really can't try and wow. The story will do that. But I recommend this book. Actually, before I would recommend The Dispossessed or The Left Hand of Darkness, to introduce you to the wonders of this author. There she is in much younger days. Our next one is not so much a book as a series of books. I've mentioned it here before, but I can't not mention it. That's the Viriconium novels of M. John Harrison, set in the dreaming city of Viriconium, which is in the late afternoon of the cultures of time, and is so old that it is forgotten how young it is, and it's filled with strange and semi-psychotic people going about their business, and some of them are trying to live normal lives, but most of them are as disjointed as the city they live in. It's almost impossible to synopsize, but the prose is so beautiful, and the whole concept is so addictive that you will want to read more Viriconium. And this is a recent collection, but there's actually more than what is in here, just a bit more, but still, even if you finish this book, you have more to find. Our next one, directly indebted to the Viriconium books, is Perdido Street Station by China Mieville, which is this is the exact same kind of thing. It's not New Viriconium, it's New Crubazon, but it's still a fully realized weird city, a city that works as a city, but is still strange and beautiful and off-kilter, and built inside the ancient rib cages of a dead creature. That's a giant rib cages of a dead creature. And there's a plot in the book. There isn't one plot in the Viriconium books. Each novel has a plot, but the whole series just sort of ambles all along. But in Perdido Street Station, there's a plot. There's a madman who's remaking himself and his victims into some new and strange image of perfection. But the prose is beautiful. The setting is every bit as evocative as it must have taken years for me able to think up New Crubazon. But it's totally involving once you start. And our last one for today, this is just a starter kit, is A Fire Upon the Deep by Vernor Vinge. This is number one, the first book in a series that it wasn't intended. There was never going to be a series when he first wrote this, so you don't have to worry about that. And it's a tesseract structure to the universe with cultures of varying complexities in different rungs of that tesseract. They don't know it, they don't see it. But an ancient technology has been discovered that could disrupt the whole settled order of the universe. And a family, much like in Startide Rising, a family is on the run with that technology, and they are taken in by a strange and savage race in it. But again, the draw for a book like this is not entirely the plot. It's mainly the writing, the sheer steep intelligence involved, and the gorgeousness of the prose and long sections. So there you have it. That is a starter kit. These are just the beginnings. There's so much more. Of course, I didn't mention Alfred Bester. I didn't mention Ray Bradbury. I didn't mention Thomas Disch, and a bunch of others. So a starter kit 102 is probably required. But I wanted to show you these just because these are some excellent basics that I can certainly recommend, especially if you haven't done it. Go and read Lord of the Rings, for God's sake. What are you waiting for? But anyway, there you have it. That's a science fiction starter kit. I'll see you soon, book 2. Thank you.